I honestly tell her, you look this or that. And two, I want her to actually look good in public because I have an ego too. So I'm one of the unusual husbands where if I go to Twin Peaks, which is a kind of a Hooters kind of bar, which I go to on Wednesday nights because they serve old fashions. I shouldn't mention the name of the company, whatever. But if she asks me, where are you? Oh, I'm in Twin Peaks and I'm having an old fashioned. I mean, I can actually say that to my wife, and I've had people today, we're talking about, can you handle the truth? Do people really want truth? I've had friends sitting next to me at this bar say, did you really tell your wife you're really here having an old fashioned, enjoying the scenery? And I said, yes. And I guess that's unusual in today's society because most men that I know my age won't tell their wives where they're at. It's kind of odd to me. I don't know why. Good day, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Inside Reality. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria, my co-host Jimmy Tran, who also incepted the show and produces the show. Thank you. Again, we have a kind of a dialectic approach to topics. I have my perspective, Jimmy has his. We're not here to be like, oh, Jimmy, you're so amazing. Oh, Jeffrey, you're so amazing. We don't
Well, I
like that.
appreciate that, though.
Well, yeah, I don't like that, which is very
We,
appropriate to today's topic, which is that Jack Nicholson expression in A Few Good Men.
You can't handle the truth.
So today we're going to talk about, do people really want honesty, truth? Authenticity is a different sort of a dimension to it. I think people want more authenticity, which is related to sincerity. But I don't really think in America, where we're so caught up in optics and youth and sex and what you look like and how much money you have, I'm not convinced that people really want the truth, because the truth always ends up being about death in the final analysis. And, Freud talked about that. So today on Inside Reality, we're talking about, do people really want truth and honesty? And I submit, not really. And anyway, so like the show, share the show, comment on the show, whatever. It's a very different approach to taking on these constructs, particularly in Western civilization and particularly in America, where we're so fascinated with being liked, with being approved. What do you think, Jimmy?
yeah. Well, I think that there's definitely different dimension or different facets to the whole thing. I think that we do want the truth. I think, but only if it makes us feel better, right? I mean, we don't necessarily want the hard truth, as they say, right? We don't want the honest truth, and I think that that's I don't know if that's necessarily cultural. I think some of that is even just maybe biological or even like a survival mechanism, right? And so for me that's kind of the thing, when I observe about myself and other people. It's like there are also different ways in which we can communicate the truth without being an ass, if you will, right? I mean, there are some people that just don't care, and so the truth comes off.
Yeah, I tend to
just
be
harsh
I tend to be
and
more into that kind of provocative, very direct, no nonsense. I like that.
yeah,
So before we prepared for the show, again, we're talking today about, do people really want truth? I submit not really, unless it
matches their
unless it
world
corroborates
view.
reducing uncertainty, the reducing uncertainty principle, which we'll talk about, unless it corroborates their version of life, and unless it also corroborates being liked and approved by the person
Yeah,
they're soliciting truth from. So
yeah,
here's a good example. You asked me this before. I love my wife. I do. We have a really interesting way of communicating. I call it compartmentalizing a topic. She tends to be very emotional. I guess I'm very passionate and emotional too. However, I I'll ask her a question about something, and I'll say, compartmentalize away your emotion as much as possible, and let's try to discuss this rationally. Well, immediately she will leap into an emotional position. Again, I'm not a hypocrite because I'm probably asking the question from an emotional uh, point of view right away. So sometimes I forget I'm being emotional in asking the question, right? But at least we
Sure.
try, and I'll give her credit, I'll give myself credit. We try to compartmentalize away, dissect away emotion from rational thinking, critical thinking about a topic. Sometimes it's a budget question, sometimes it's about for the good of the household, whatever. But we generally are able to arrive at a critically thought out uh, uh, process in making that decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
However, in that same world, we have the kind of relationship. I love you, Nancy. I love you. If she asks me, how do I look in this dress? If she looks a little chubby or something because the color, the pattern isn't conducive with her frame, because she's not a big woman. She's a beautiful woman, obviously, but she's got a different framework than me. I'm more of a, kind of a leaner, whatever. So
Slender build. You're more.
certain kinds of clothes don't look good on me that might look good on her in reverse. But if she asks me that question, how do I look in this blouse dress? I'm going to tell her the truth. I'm actually going to say that color does not befit you because you're already pale, and don't wear beige, right? Don't wear
Yeah.
white because I can't see you when you're white. You're so white. And so we're able to have that conversation. Now, don't get me wrong. She may feel a little disruption, but I'm trying to communicate honestly for two reasons. One, she asked me a question: how do you look in this dress? And I honestly tell her, you look this or that. And two, I want her to actually look good in public because I have an
Sure.
ego too. So I'm
Absolutely.
one of the unusual husbands where if I go to Twin Peaks, which is a kind of a Hooters kind of bar, which I go to on Wednesday nights because they serve old fashions. I shouldn't mention the name of the company, whatever. But if she asks me, where are you? Oh, I'm in Twin Peaks and I'm having an old fashioned. I mean, I can actually say that to my wife. And I've had people, today we're talking about, can you handle the truth? Do people really want truth? I've had friends sitting next to me at this bar say, did you really tell your wife you're really here having an old fashioned, enjoying the scenery? And I said, yes. And I guess that's unusual in today's society because most men that I know my age won't tell their wives where they're at. It's kind of odd to me. I don't know why. What do you think? I
Well, I
know
don't
you're
know
not
if.
married, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know. So for one thing, I don't think that this is relegated to our modern society per se. I mean,
no,
I
I
mean, a
agree.
lot of these cliches and a lot of these things are because of what we've. I mean, as a society, as a general, relationship in society. Now, there is the distinction between like Eastern versus Western society. Like European society versus Asian
In
society.
terms of
That
truth,
different in
honesty.
terms of truth and what it means and some of those things. And it's not always clear sometimes because of those cultural elements that are there. For instance, there are cultures literally that says you cannot lie to your own, but you can lie to outsider. Okay, for instance, that's a cultural norm that exists. Okay, if it's somebody outside, you can lie directly to their face and it's okay
Right,
and it's acceptable.
right,
Whereas if you lie to somebody within your family, within your enclave, then it's no longer acceptable. So as an example of how sometimes these different
right,
cultural elements do
right,
break down.
right.
I really still think that you should watch this movie called, I think it's called, if I remember, Allegiance. It's a book series that kind of came on the tail of Hunger Games, but it's not. But it's about how the world, in the book that became a movie, it evolved the world was kind of divided up into different factions. So there's one faction that is, about just being completely, being honest, right? They call it the faction of candor, where people would speak with, and then there's the other one that is full compassion, where they try to, sugarcoat everything to that, and then there's those that are dauntless, where they're just out there, fighting and so forth. So all of these different factions, and I think we all have these elements.
Hell for me would go to the compassion. I don't want to go there. That's hell for me. Like, oh, you look so wonderful in that dress. Oh my God. When in reality they don't,
sometimes it's also this is setup, right? I mean, we talk about this. Okay, let's just dig deeper into this question, right? I mean, if the question was asked a little bit differently, for instance, if the question was asked, "Do I look fat in this dress?" Right? that would have a different response. I mean, that's certainly a setup question, right? I mean,
I don't know.
Who's married.
Again, we're talking about, do people really want truth and honesty in their lives and their relationships? What do you mean by a setup? Because you're
setup meaning that there's only one right answer, right? I mean, in a sense,
not in my world.
They want to
not
hear.
in my world.
Well, no, I understand. You're unique. Okay,
no, I'm not unique.
Jeffrey, you're unique.
I negotiated with my wife before we got married that we were going to be honest with each other.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
Honest.
Yeah,
and
that's a good thing.
Sometimes I've had girlfriends in my life who have struggled with weight, and they have asked me, maybe that's what you mean by saying, do I look fat in this dress? I'll say, you don't look fat, but you don't look good in that dress because you're wearing horizontal stripes and you're already a box figure woman and you're a little overweight. I would wear vertical stripes. That's how I would answer that question. And because I was answering that question sincerely and with some actual thought, 9 out of 10 times, well, maybe 7 out of 10 times, the woman received it with grace, because she knew I had thought about it and had her interest in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas most men just run away from that question, which I find pathetic.
And what's interesting is that you've demonstrated in these two scenarios already that how you respond, how you answer the question is just as important as the truth of the answer. Okay. Like, because that's, I think, important too, because I think sometimes we take the shortcut, right? And we say yes or no without really thinking about it.
Or run away,
because
avoidance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, for instance, I have a couple of good friends. They just got married not too long ago. And the guy, the husband is like so timid at times, making, because he's afraid that he's going to get her mad, right? And so it was like we stood there for 5 minutes because he couldn't decide whether he should do something or not, because he didn't want to get her mad because she came down on things that a certain way. So anyway, that's not a healthy relationship when you have to do that kind of dancing around
living a life being obsequious. It's awful.
Yeah,
the obsequious man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happens with women too. Where I've seen women do that same thing. When it comes to their relationship with their man, in that scenario. So that's I think part of the dynamics, right? And so I think that a lot of times, of course, how do we really resolve that type of scenario? I mean, certainly
you negotiate.
There's a lot of things.
You manage expectation.
Sure.
If I'm in a relationship with you, which I do, you're my friend. How I am. I'm direct. I don't like screwing around. But you're able to communicate with me directly too, and I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah.
But we negotiated it, and we have an expectation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's probably where people miss the boat. When we all say we want honesty, it's so dumb. We don't. If we really think we want honesty, we need to define what that is. We need to manage expectation, and I think we need to negotiate. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Actually, it's interesting. I have a little sheet that I have posted, a few years ago that remind me that one of the things that I can do on a regular basis that'll help me, not just in my personal life, but also, in my business, but also in my personal life, is to negotiate daily with with people, with situation.
Yeah.
Because negotiation is definitely one of the things that we, as a society, have kind of abdicated in many ways to allow other people to make the negotiation, and we just kind of like
Yeah, we're sitting there
agree or
as like
disagree.
passive in that calculation,
Yeah.
but we're not taught to negotiate. Uh, Again, we're talking today about truth. How do we really want truth in our lives? Do we really want honesty? For example, in this is a bit of a platitude, but you've all seen those representations of Arabic people haggling with each other,
Yeah.
for whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want a camel, they want some
Sure.
food, whatever, and it's the haggling, right? You go to
Yep.
Mexico at Juarez, you would haggle with the people at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mercado, but that's cultural there.
There is. Yeah.
And I thought you brought that point up earlier. There's an anthropological predilection to negotiate and haggle
Yep.
because they didn't have, this is a $5 bill, this is an item, there's no negotiation, and it's just a transaction. And I think it's interesting because the art of negotiation, to me, is a predicate to how much honesty and truth and sincerity does your partner want, does your audience want, does whoever you're marketing to want. And I've made it my business to let people know, this is how I am, this is how I do it, and if you don't like it, don't be around me. But I'm also pretty much, not always, able to reciprocate and have the person returning tell me, what they think to or like or not like. But the point is, the negotiation is a predicate to how much truth people, I think, in their lives will tolerate.
Yeah, I mean that's one level, but I don't think that necessarily negotiation connote or immediately get honesty from people, right? I mean, because you can negotiate if you have somebody that is dishonest, let's say, right? I mean, they can still negotiate with you to get the outcome that they want, and so part of where it turns, I think, the corner, from that is when it now becomes manipulation, right? So negotiation and manipulation is right there on the edge with each other, and so when somebody is trying to get you to do something, right, and you're negotiating, I mean, obviously, we've seen the used car salesman, so to speak, right? Rhetoric or persona, right?
Yeah.
Where they will tell you anything and everything in order to get you to buy,
Right.
because they want to get that close to happen. And so I think that there's that part of it too.
Yeah.
That
Today
you
we're
can
talking
go
on
to
Inside
the
Reality
extreme.
about truth. How much truth do we really want in society, particularly in American Western civilization, society, that world? I disagree with you to an extent. Again, maybe it's just the way I negotiate. I've had people, even members of my own family, and on my dad's side, there's a different level of ethics, which is not good. But that'll say things like, in the past have said, "Hey, Jeffrey, I understand you're working on your house. Can I help you? You give me $50, I'll help," and I'll negotiate with them because I already know that some of that part of the family doesn't really understand what ethics are, or
Yeah.
commitment. Don't get mad. Uh, so I'll make a caveat, like, if you're not here on time, deal's off. So right away, I'm already making
Sure.
counter caveats to their anticipated manipulation or lack of commitment, and if those are violated, deal's off. I
Yeah.
bought a car several times in my life with a guy, like you said, used car salesman, da 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 da. Oh, we don't negotiate the price. Don't negotiate the price. Okay. Well, what about giving me 6 months, every 3 weeks, or every 500 miles, a tank of gas, and I'll buy the car. Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so, or give me free mats, MATS, or how about I get a free car wash here at your car wash place every month? So I've negotiated those things. He didn't compromise the price, but I was able to negotiate some other
Yeah.
ancillaries that benefited
Yeah.
my experience with that car. So the point I'm making is, everything's negotiable. in
Yeah.
any circumstance.
Agree that, yeah. And that's, I think the other part of it too is that in our society, in the United States in particular, and maybe in the West in general, because things are very much definitive in terms of number.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, we put a price tag on, right? I mean, literally, there are cultural. I mean, if you've ever traveled, I've traveled a good part of the world, you know, at various times, and there are places that you go that there's no prices because they want you to negotiate. Pretty much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you ask them how much is this, they'll tell you what the price is, and then because they're expecting that
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yeah.
Whereas here in the U.S., the prices are very defined because there's a price tag
Yeah.
on there,
Yeah.
and because of that, you know, we kind of stop there. Oh, because that's the price, therefore, we don't negotiate.
I think a lot of that's a really good
train.
point. Again, we're talking about how much truth and honesty do we want in society. This is Jeffrey Candelaria. This is Jimmy Tran. I only inserted myself into that because I think it's really interesting that I think after the Enlightenment, I think it was the 1700s, right in there, where we introduced science, the scientific method, that
Sure.
became such a staple into America's way of interpreting the world. As you know,
Yeah.
science tends to be very precise, very empirically
Consistent
and it's replicatable. And you can't
Yep.
replicate something unless you put the exact same calculations into a formula. And I think that's where we get a little bit of this microwave is $328. It's almost like there was a calculation to arrive at the profit, the manufacturing, the
Yep.
wholesale, the middleman,
The
all that.
distribution
And I
all
think
that kind of stuff. Yep.
the Enlightenment and the scientific method, I'm just surmising here, contribute to the precision that Americans tend to be fascinated with or sort of used to. Whereas opposed to countries that didn't experience the Enlightenment and all the scientific method, there's more of a fluid way of negotiating for an item. The give and take, I think, is there, absent
Yeah.
more of the scientific method that underpins that transaction.
Yeah, you definitely raise an interesting perspective on that because I don't know personally if the Enlightenment is the contributing factor. I don't know if that's.
I think it's one
certainly
of them.
the case.
Is what I'm saying. One of them.
It certainly, yeah, it can. I think that because we're dealing with a lot more complexity in the systems that and not the service so much, but the systems and the. I mean, like for instance, we talk about the cell phone and all these parts, meaning that there's a cost associated with it, right? Whereas when you're dealing with something a little bit more primitive, like let's say a piece of woodwork, where the cost is not, because it's mostly labor rather than the material cost. So as a result, you're not having to do the finer detail of calculations to determine if it's profitable or not.
Yeah.
Because the variable really is in the labor in terms of when we're looking at production and
Or the
cost and
resource
everything.
itself.
So-
If it's wood, how much of that wood is available in my tribe, or was there weather that affected the wood's integrity? So there were only 5 or 7 factors that made
components in it.
that
Yep.
ended up making that chest of drawers, right? Whereas a
Yep.
complicated device like a phone, you're talking about maybe 50,000 components and, global markets and transit and warehousing. And you're right. It's a lot more
you might
complicated.
still have you might still have all of those things too in terms of distribution and cost. But the raw materials, the things that go into it is minimal, right? So you don't have a lot of material costs. So because of that, you have more. Like for instance, here's an example. Okay, I remember hearing a story where this lady she spotted Pablo Picasso at a restaurant, and she went up to him and she said, "Hey, you're Pablo Picasso. I'd love to get your autograph, or can you draw this or whatever." I mean, I forget the details of it, but anyway, she asked him to draw something, right? And so she drew something, and then she said, "Oh, that's so wonderful." He says, "May I have it?" And he's like, "Yeah, it'll cost you $500 or
Yeah,
something
of
like
course.
that." And she's like, "What? you just scribbled this on this napkin, Says, yeah, but it's the value, So he understood his worth.
Absolutely.
Sure. And even though the material costs there on the napkin and the pen was probably pennies, but because of his value and what he brought. So, you have an apprentice versus a master carpenter. Big difference in terms of the value that they bring. Yeah. And that's where the elasticity of the price and everything gets negotiated with.
Again, let's come back to truth. How does this relate to truth and honesty? Because that's
I think that relates to truth in the sense that some people look at truth as more elastic than definitive. Okay. That's why I brought this example up, right? Because in the West, we have pricing that are very, very definitive, right? I mean, and actually, it's all an illusion too.
It's a legal term.
It's a bit of an illusion too.
Dispositive. That's a
because the MSRP, for instance. MSRP and SRP, for instance,
are really suggested price. Manufacturer suggested price.
Arbitrary. They're arbitrary based on some type of calculation, but it's arbitrary, and so you can sell it at whatever price you want, depending on how much profit you want or how quickly you want to turn it, and so forth. Yeah. That's why you see businesses
let's get back
to
the rudiments of truth and honesty, though. Again, we're talking, this is Inside Reality. Every week we talk about a topic, we dissect it from different perspectives. We try to be honest about it, even at the expense of revealing some of my own personal, darker sides. You don't do that as much. Of course, you're much more of a saintly guy than me. But, and I want to be clear, I love my wife, Nancy. I was just using that as an example because I try to be honest on this show, right? I'm using my own marriage as an example and dissecting it because that's the kind of honesty that I'm trying to bring to this show that I don't think other podcasts do as much. I really don't. That's why I detest these donut-eating politicians because 9 out of 10 of them are just ridiculously hypocritical and unwilling to tell the truth. Tell the truth. So anyway, other components of honesty when I negotiate are sincerity. I think sincerity is such a lost art in our society, and I'm not clear as to why that is either. Because if you're truly sincere when your wife says, "Do I look fat in this bland dress that's got horizontal stripes?" By definition, when you're wearing horizontal, the way the eye perceives, it's going to look wider. Whatever the hell you are, it's going to look wider.
Yeah.
So whomever is wearing a horizontal dress and they're already struggling with weight and they ask you the question, the first thing I'd say is, well, the optics of the way we perceive graphics or what have you, it's better if you wear vertical stripes than horizontal stripes. So I'd begin with that because I'm being sincere. I'm not just being honest, I'm being sincere. Yeah. So there's a level of, gosh, dare I say it, compassion with being sincere with people.
Well, there is.
And because I love my wife, I want to be sincere with her and generally say, better for you to wear stripes. With me, it's a reverse because I'm really thin. It's better if I wear horizontal because I look like a rail. So she'll tell me often too in reverse, you look really skinny in that whatever the hell you're wearing. And, my feelings are hurt for a microsecond and then I take what she says as a sincere, honest sample of feedback. So I'm saying that honesty, we haven't talked about authenticity yet, but sincerity is a component of honesty and truth in our society that I don't think we talk enough about. I don't think we provide enough about sincerity.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also another level to that based on what you just described in terms of your relationship with your wife, for instance. I mean, you both have a desire to, for instance, on one level, I can tell from what you just what you said is that your desire to make each other better, right?
So that's
one part. So I think that's also an important part of honesty and sincerity in terms of relationship is that when we approach a situation or approach an individual with already a kind of like, oh, this person is out to get me, right? So if that adversarial type of relationship is in place, I think that's when the challenge of being open and honest with people become a challenge.
So here's what I'd say to that. And I've done this. I know you're out to get me, so I have to be wary of what you tell me. No, I say that out loud.
Yeah.
I had a guy one time. I was leaving the job. I had the job 15 years. He was taking over the job, and I told him, I said, I really don't trust you, but I think you're capable of doing the job. I hope you don't betray my trust, because I think you're a bit of an exploitive personality. I think you're exploiting this job for your own purposes. And I think you're capable of it, but I'm just telling you to your face, I think you're a bit manipulative, and I think you're going to exploit this position, which I'm recommending you take because you're capable of it. So the capability weighed more than his exploitive propensities. And when I said that to him, I think he really did govern himself. I mean, I didn't really track it after I left, but the fact that I said out loud, here's my suspicion of you. Why don't we do that more in society? Just say out loud what we think.
And what's interesting, that what you just pinpointed, actually, what's interesting is that's a type of and a level of accountability that and setting the standard, right? I mean, so that goes back to our societal challenge that we deal with in today's world, where everybody gets a trophy, right? So and because of that, there's the standards that we have. There's no expectation, no standard, and so no one ever really tried to live up to anything, because of that, right? And so I think that that's part of the dynamics when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I know that for me, relational stuff is a challenge. I have to work extra hard. I mean, maybe for you it comes more naturally, but for me, on one level is that I tend to trust everybody. I'm kind of being open, honest here, transparent. I tend to trust anybody and everybody almost all the time, and so as a result, I can get kind of suckered in, if you say, and become more naive, because I think I try to look at the better quality of the person rather than trying to think, oh, that person is trying, even if they got a knife in my back. I mean, that's how sometimes the extreme of my lack of perspective when it comes to relationship is, because I just want to see what's good, but then I don't always communicate well sometimes, and so again, that's part of how I struggle and that's why when we first met, I thought you were an ass. I'll be honest, right? And it took me a while, and you see your consistency, and really, I would even have to say that even after about 20 years of friendship, really in the last few months since we've started this podcast, that I've gotten to understand and know you a lot better than I would have otherwise.
So you said something interesting. I knew that you thought I was an ass when we first met. I don't care. I'm comfortable in my own skin. Not everybody gets it. I don't care. But you said something interesting. Consistency is truth for me. Have I been consistent for 20 years?
Sure.
I'm exactly what I am all the time. And this isn't about me. I'm just saying, I guess I learned that growing up where I did, because my mother died when I was a kid. I always talk about that because I had to be kind of an adult as a child. So I had to be sort of worldly, like, you know what I mean? And understand the seriousness of life and read people. And maybe that's where I learned all this stuff. That's why I'm cynical. I can read people pretty well. And
you were street smart. That's what they call it.
There's a certain wisdom. There's a certain wisdom to being street smart. And but yeah, I mean, the fact is, it did bother me when we first met that you thought I was whatever the hell you said it out loud in front of thousands and millions of people. It doesn't bother me because I am what I am. We've carved out a sincere, honest, respectful relationship.
Absolutely.
And look how dichotomized our personalities are.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is that because of that, it helped me kind of get a better understanding, again, because I think that for me, because you maintained that consistency, it allowed me to see more of it than otherwise, right? I mean, I know it's hard sometimes when we're dealing in a relationship or in a situation where we only see the person once or twice. We really, our judgment of that person is just from those few interactions. But because we got to interact with each other over the years through networking and through business and and so forth, and then of course in the last several months through just developing this podcast, I think that made a big difference in terms of that. And I do appreciate you agreeing to be a part of this, so that because it has helped me become better as a communicator as well.
That's actually my wife. Live TV here.
She heard.
She heard
your comment.
She heard me talking about us. But anyway, the other, we got about 8 minutes, but the other part of truth that I don't think why people really want truth is a lot of times truth won't corroborate their being approved, liked, or their interpretation of the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's why a lot of folks stay in their own little insulated cliques, because each person sort of like synergistically reciprocates their own. Oh, Trump! I hate Trump. He's horrible. The democracy's going to end. All that dumb stuff. And real truth and honesty, it's like I've said before. Looking at yourself naked in a full-length mirror is hard to do. Yeah. And I don't think people do that, because that is what it is. The mirror does not lie. It is what it is. And so I think the whole...
Well, it depends on the type of mirror. It can lie.
Yeah, if you're at the fun house at the New Mexico State Fair in Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's a different the warping of the texture of the mirror. But anyway, this fascination with wanting to be liked and approved is another facet that I think is especially particular to this American Western civilization that we currently live in more than a lot of other places. I'm sure it exists all over the world, but here, I think to me, it seems particularly pronounced, being liked and approved.
And I don't think that that's necessarily always the case, right? I mean, if you look at the cultural evolution, right, you see kind of like the cowboy kind of, I don't care what you think of me, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, kind of thing, right? So I think that was kind of the cultural shift that we've seen in the last.
That was for a period of time, not very long.
Yeah,
it lasted after the Civil War until the Gilded Age, and remember.
Even the 50s.
Okay,
more
fine.
Like that.
The fascination with Western cowboys and all this is still there. But I'm saying the actual cowboy and all that, there wasn't a lot of population back then west of the Mississippi. I think those were small, aberrant expressions of sovereign autonomy, which I think we long for. I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, and a little bit of Charlton Heston and some of the John Wayne stuff. But that whole fascination with sovereignty and autonomy and being your own man and having conviction and standing for something. But I'm just saying the actual expression of it between after the Civil War through the Gilded Age, 1880s, somewhere in there, I don't think that cowboy, the Clint Eastwood cowboy thing, it didn't really last that long.
Well, I didn't mean cowboy in the literal sense, although that's part of what I said. I mean, I meant more of that. Got
like about 8 minutes.
The bravado, the bravadas that we observe from, like we're the king of the hill. We're the, again, going back to even what we talked about in the last episode about Make America Great Again. That's the greatness that I think that we have lost. Right now, you can make the case, I think, that part of the loss of that has to do with really in the last 40 years, give or take, literally 30 to 40 years, we literally doubled our population from people outside. So from a cultural normative standpoint, we have shifted the American experience, if you will, right? We have literally shifted within a very short period of time. I mean, the composition of the cultural experience to outside that are different. And so now you can make the case and argue that, well, was that good or bad or whatever? And I think that that's also part of what we.
Well, we also moved to cities, which we've talked about. And
That's another thing.
and
Yeah.
and technology has made
Yeah.
us less reliant on other people. People now can live in an apartment and order food and clothing and groceries.
Never have to
They don't have to
leave.
leave. They don't have to interact with
Yeah.
other people. And then with what is automated intellectual, what is it, AI? What's it
Yeah.
called? Artificial
Which one?
intelligence.
Out of
You can
AI. Yeah.
create your own girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
It's really interesting if you extrapolate all that into what will look like 30 years from now. Again, we've been
Yeah.
talking about how much truth and honesty do we really want. And what I've tried to submit in this podcast is the way I've conducted my life is I've negotiated truth, I've been sincere with truth, I've been authentic with truth, I've been consistent with truth, and I've been willing to accept truth back in terms of reciprocity, good, bad, and ugly. And I also manage the expectation of truth with whomever I'm dealing with. And
Yeah.
and it's
One thing that
it's been difficult because not everybody gets that,
Yeah.
or
Well,
me.
another thing that is also interesting in terms of your perspective of negotiating the truth, I think that also I think lends to the principle of self. What do you call it?
Awareness.
Not just self awareness, but taking responsibility
Oh
for
yeah,
yourself.
being accountable.
Yeah,
Accountable.
because meaning that we're getting what we're getting from somebody, and that's it, right? And so if we negotiate it and we got something that we,
Yep.
well, then that's on us if we got what we negotiated, right? But if we didn't get what we negotiated, obviously, then there's a different story.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also important when it comes to negotiation, is that you're willing to accept this term, and so we're going to move on or move forward with
Yeah.
whatever
I think
it
we
is
should
that
talk
we're doing.
about this
And-
at a future podcast. People like me are willing to be uncomfortable. And I really think too, a lot, and maybe it's just because I'm old and I'm, don't get on my lawn. Yes, I am that guy. The young people I see are unwilling to be uncomfortable as much as baby boomers. Maybe that's too an extreme a statement, but I've always gone to where the fire is. F-I-R-E-R,
Sure.
F-I-R-E, whatever that means. I always
Yeah.
go to where the action is, and it's cost me, a lot in my life,
Yeah.
good, bad, and ugly, but it's been rewarding to expose myself into places where it's not comfortable, because I think that's the space between the notes where life really, really works. The space between the notes. Only
Yeah.
on Inside Reality.
Well, and that's really, I mean, if you really think about it, that's actually, if we were to look at it from a linguistical sense, right? The consonants are the structure, but the vowels are what makes the sound, okay? Because consonants don't make sound,
Right.
okay? But it's the transition between, and so that's what you're talking about, and that's where life is that's where life is lived, if you will. But because we are so focused on those pillars of things, we lose.
Well, you've talked about this
lose-
before, the fascination with our culture being convenient and
Yeah.
and thwarting as much pain as possible and
Yeah.
and lusting for the delights and the sugar
The
and all
indulgence.
the indulgences.
Yeah.
But the other parts that got us to building this rocket, being uncomfortable, making sacrifices, that's not a vogue thing, man. It's just not vogue.
Yeah.
And it comes across as really harsh if you even propagate or promulgate any of those constructs. Anyway, we've got about a minute left. Again, thank you for tuning into another episode of Inside Reality. It's Jeffrey Candelaria along with Jimmy Tran. Please share, like, comment, but give this podcast some attention. I think it's pretty unusual as a podcast because we dare to be uncomfortable and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the last thing, in terms of thought here too, is that the difference between endorphins and dopamine, right? Are you familiar with these two
Yeah.
neurotransmitters in our
they're
brain?
natural organic stimulants in the bloodstream, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the way the brain communicates is through these, and so the likability factor is driven, I think, by the dopamine, that we're trying to feed, that we need to feed on, right? That's why every time you hit that like button and all that, which, by the way, please like this video, while we're done, because we would like to experience a little bit of that dopamine as well, and share and save this video, because
what's the
'cause
distinction
it'll help
between
us
that and
grow
the
our channel.
endorphin then, as we conclude?
Yeah. But the endorphin is also a little bit different. Endorphin is a natural chemical that produced by the body that acts as the body's natural pain relievers and mood boosters.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, I mean, this is where there's a difference in the sense that the dopamine kind of it's also a mood regulator, but in a kind of different way, where it's the seeking of pleasure is the dopamine side.
Yeah, the endorphin
Whereas
is
the
a runner.
endorphin is
Because I'm a runner, it's the endorphin.
runner's high.
The runner's
Yeah,
high.
that's where the endorphins
It's
come.
the
Yeah,
endorphin, yeah. It's
but in order
it's-
to have pain,
yeah.
in order to have endorphins, you got to have pain, because
Sacrifice.
that's when
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the result
I think
is,
that's
the
a
result is fitness and a kind of a sense of accomplishment after you conclude the run. Anyway, folks,
Yeah.
it's been great. We've been talking about truth in America, the unwillingness to actually assimilate it. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. This is Inside Reality. We'll be with
Jimmy
you next
Tran.
week.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy, for incepting and calling me an ass on live TV.
absolutely.
and
you can count on that anytime.
And Inside Reality and producing the show. Have a good week.
All right. See you guys later. Please like, comment, and share your thoughts. I mean, maybe you have stories of how being honest isn't worked out for you. Love to hear it, and have that conversation. Put it in the chat. Thank you. Bye-bye.